Good morning, Darren. Lovely to be with you. I'm saying good morning.
Afternoon.
It's good afternoon.
I'm saying
good afternoon for you. Good morning for me. Yeah.
But it's lovely to be with you.
That's okay. It's just nice to be in the same virtual space.
That's it.
I'm Darren Morton.
I'm Simon Matthews. This is Lift,
The Lifestyle Medicine podcast where we dive into the science of health and well-being.
I want to talk today about one of my favourite topics, broadly about behavioural change, but quite specifically about one element of that. But I'm going to start by asking you a question, and that is, I wonder if you can bring to mind for yourself a time when you had a goal to do something or achieve something. You were working really hard towards a particular outcome, and you didn't get there.
Oh, didn't get there. I thought you were going to give me the opportunity to gloat and tell you about some goal that I did get.
No, you get that every week.
Yeah, let's just talk about my failures.
I ran 100 Ks last week. I hang glided from Sydney to Perth.
No. Let's talk about what a miserable failure I am. Look, I think I can one very close. I got close, and that almost makes it worse. I think the goal that I failed by. So I've when I turn 50, I do my local park run, and I wanted to run so it's 5 kilometers, and I wanted to do sub 17 minutes for my park run. And so I was training, and on the track, I'd actually done that, that time. And I thought, okay, here we go. And so I tell you what, it was painful, and I worked really hard towards it. And then, do you know what time I did, Simon?
17:03.
17 minutes and 3 seconds. And I remember in that last 100 meters, just like feeling like I was going to die. And I got across the line, and I was just waiting for them to say. I said, "What's the time? What's the time?" And I was hoping to hear something, but it wasn't. It was 17 something, and I'm like, "Oh!" And here's the thing that's really disheartening about it is that I was 50 and I'm 55 now, and I haven't got close to that again, and I know that I'll never get that now. So it's unlikely that I'll ever actually do that. So there's a goal that I set for myself. That I missed, and that I actually probably, just due to physiological aging, probably won't ever get there.
So without being overly cruel, I've already heard you use the word disheartening to describe that experience. What else do you recall about the way that you felt when you didn't achieve that thing that you so much wanted to achieve?
Well, I think that for me, my first response is like, okay, well, let's work harder and let's go again and get the job done.
So double down.
But I do think there was something in my subconscious too at that time, thinking you're not getting faster. I think there was I was sort of coming to terms with, okay, well, let's go again. Let's, okay. But then also knowing that, hey, the way things are moving, you probably might not get that. So I don't know. I think I find that a little bit hard to reconcile because, as I think life's an interesting thing, in those early years, you're growing and possibilities are developing. And then at some point you have to come to reconcile and get to this point where you realize that, hey, you know what, maybe some of the goals that I would have loved to have hit maybe are not possible anymore.
And I'm hearing in your voice there, you talked about feeling a little disheartened about the outcome of this, and I'm hearing in your voice there perhaps something of a sense of resignation or something similar to that.
I think there's a little bit of that, and I think that there is. I think you have to, come to terms with that a little bit. The things that helped me come to terms with it is the fact that I got two very athletic young sons, who are sort of in their prime, and they still have not beat, like one of them did 17:08. He did 17 minutes, this is just about a few months ago, 17 minutes and 8 seconds. And I get great delight in saying, that's a great run, son. Well done, man. You're very close to my 50-year-old PB, personal best. So,
Nice.
so I
Nice.
think you're amused, but at the heart of it, I still would have liked to have done it.
Yeah.
Probably not going to
So
happen.
this is an interesting artifact of goal setting. That when we create goals for ourselves, including in lifestyle medicine and behavioural change, when we create goals for ourselves, we not only create an aiming point or a desirable outcome, we also create a fairly momentous opportunity for disappointment. That's true. And feeling disheartened, and maybe even let down by ourselves because of the outcome. And I'm going to establish a value position here and say I don't think it's desirable to have too many of those experiences, and I don't want to slip into happyology territory here and say we should never experience disappointment. Disappointment can be a good teacher. Frustration, sadness, they can all be good teachers for us. And somewhere in there, we need to have some really good experiences of this as well, to kind of inspire and encourage us.
Sure.
And there's actually some reasonably robust evidence about this, and I'm thinking of Barbara Fredrickson's work about ratios of positive affect to negative affect and so on. So we've got this dilemma. On the one hand, we know that goals help. So a goal that's quite specific, for example, I want to run a 5K race this Saturday at 9 a.m. in 17 minutes or under, 16 minutes 59 or under. A really specific goal like that is great because it focuses attention and it focuses effort. It also set you, I heard you describe the training pathway that it put you on. So you were training and working towards that. So there's a whole lot of ancillary and related behaviours that you're now recruiting to be able to try and achieve that particular goal. I'm almost certain you were using processes of self-monitoring and feedback to help you judge your effort and the outcomes you were getting and so on through that process. So setting goals is helpful. There's just no question about that. But what do we do when not achieving that particular goal has an adverse effect, like triggering frustration or shame, or even reduced self-efficacy?
For sure.
For example, I don't think I'm capable of that anymore. And I think I even heard you say that. Now that I'm 55, I don't think that's even possible anymore. And I don't know, physiologically maybe it's not, but I don't know, maybe with the right training it is possible too.
Yeah.
The point is that you're having that emotional experience of a little bit of disappointment, a reduction in self-efficacy. And for some people that can be a whole lot worse. For some people that turns into what I call the boom and bust cycle of thinking, so that kind of all or nothing thinking. For example, if someone has a goal to, eat a plate full of vegetables at lunch every day for the coming week for 7 days, and then for some reason, I don't know, one day they get overtaken by a desire to eat fried chicken or something like that, and then their thinking goes to, well, I ruined it yesterday, so there's no point trying now for the rest of the week.
Yeah.
I might as well just do, whatever for the rest of the week. And then maybe next week I'll try again. So that boom and bust thinking, which is probably also partly related to personality and the type of personality we have, that tends to get triggered by missing goals as well. Then we get further consequential undesirable effects like starting to disengage altogether, starting to withdraw even from the idea of doing this. There's not much point. I feel like I've tried so hard. I can't take this disappointment anymore. I used to hear this a lot when I worked in bariatrics several years ago. So I used to, see patients who were having bariatric surgery, both pre and post surgery, primarily around the behavioural change components, but also sometimes around the psychological adjustment to major surgery like that. And one of the things that I used to hear people say really frequently was, "This can't fail. I've just got to. This has got to succeed for me. I can't take another failure in my life." And what those people were really saying was, "I have tried so many times across the course of my life to lose weight, to change my diet, and so on, and emotionally, I can't take another battering like that again."
Yes.
So these are some really significant kind of real world problems with goal setting that we need to somehow find a way around. Because I don't know about you, but clearly it's not. I think it's not desirable for someone to have this experience repeatedly.
Oh, I definitely agree with that, and I think that that self-efficacy piece I think is tremendously important. Because people have the confidence to try, and if once that's diminished, then why? If you feel like you're failing, no one wants to fail constantly. As you're speaking though, I'm sort of thinking, well, is goal setting a worthwhile activity? And obviously, there's value in it. It seems. Although I have heard. I remember one of the earliest reports I heard about goal setting was, write your goals down. If you write your goals down, you're 95% more inclined to achieve them, or something or other, which I've since, I think, has been debunked. I think it was that got on the motivational speaking circuit, and people just repeated the same story, that some researchers have done a study and found that to be the case. So I'm not sure whether there's value in that, but the whole idea of, should we have goals? And if and certainly if we're going to have goals, we don't want ones that are unrealistic or unobtainable, such that we're set up for failure. We certainly want goals that are going to stretch us but not snap us. How do we do that? What does that look like?
Well, and I think it's even more complex and nuanced than that. The orientation, the purpose of the goal setting, I think is really important to clarify. It seems to me to be unarguable that setting a goal for something has some value, whatever that might be. And it doesn't have to be a health related, it can be a goal to buy a house or buy a car, or, improve your fitness, or complete a PhD if you're crazy enough to start one of those. Whatever that goal might be, setting that as a goal in your mind can be useful, because for those reasons that we've talked about, it helps you to design behaviours that are going to point you towards that. At the same time, the way that we frame goals, and particularly health-related goals, to patients and clients, I think is really important here. One of the challenges that we have is that all of our goal setting as clinicians and lifestyle medicine practitioners happens within this context of fairly enormous social pressures and social norms. So, for example, there are norms around physical looks. There are, norms around what you do, when you do it, and so on. And sometimes we're measuring sometimes we're measuring the wrong things. Actually, a good example of this is BMI. So we for years we've measured BMI as a means of, or we haven't measured BMI. We've measured waist and height and established BMI as a means of assessing health. We now know that it's actually not that great. It maybe puts you in the ballpark for a chunk of people, but there's a lot of people for whom it's not really a great indicator of underlying health. So making sure that we are in fact measuring the right things, making sure that we're setting goals that are meaningful, setting a goal of reducing your BMI from 28 to 25, I don't think is necessarily that meaningful. One of the ways that you can reduce your BMI from 28 to 25 is wear platform shoes next time you go for your measurements.
That's true.
And that'll shift it favourably. So I think it's really important that clinicians in working with goals and working with their patients and clients frame goals from the outset as primarily opportunities to learn and understand more, rather than necessarily a goal to achieve a particular outcome. And this kind of aligns with something that we've spoken about recently, the idea of what does sustainable change actually mean? Does it mean sustaining a very specific behaviour indefinitely, or does it mean, the meaning that I prefer to give it, which is supporting a person to develop the capacity to adapt and flex their own behaviours for the long term in order to continue to, achieve levels of good and robust health. So having this framework that says that the goal is not, or the purpose of the goal is not to be a certain weight or have a certain body composition or to have a certain BMI, but the goal is for you to be able to develop both the skills necessary, the knowledge necessary, and the feedback mechanisms necessary to learn what's going to work for you and what you're going to be able to do in the long term to continue to pursue this idea of health. I think is much more useful.
Do you think is that a little bit wishy-washy though? Like, is it because it's not measurable as such? Like, is that a consequence of going after a well-defined goal, or do you think that should be the intent?
Lift is supported by the Lift Project, an educational adventure where you learn science-based ways to lift your mood and your life. The Lift Project is lifting lives around the globe, in healthcare settings, workplaces, schools, universities and communities. To find out more, visit theliftproject.global.
So I think I think it's both. I think yes, if we just set up a goal as learning something, I don't know, conceivably, I think that has the possibility of being a little bit wishy-washy and a little bit hard to define. Although it is perhaps a little consistent with what are called open goals, and I'll say something more about those shortly. But I think it's possible to set a goal to say, let's I hear that you want to run 5Ks in 17 minutes, and as part of our discussions about that, ask questions like, what will it mean for you if you don't do that? What would it mean? What would it mean to you thinking now in the future? What would it mean to you to finish that in 17:05 or 17:10, something like that? Have that conversation now, because that's now an opportunity also to explore this idea of learning. You might say, it would mean that I'd failed. I'd failed to achieve something that I really wanted. If you said that to me, my next question would be, and apart from failing, what else could this mean? What other meanings are possible in all of this? And to have that conversation ahead of time, so that as you go into all the training and the activity and so on towards that outcome, you're doing it already with a mindset that's looking not just to this number 17 on a piece of paper, but that's looking to all the other components of this: what I'm learning about myself, the skills I'm building, et cetera, et cetera.
So it's not just about what you're doing; it's about what you're becoming in the process of doing. I quite like that.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this discussion reminds me Stephen Covey. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The author of that. He had this really interesting quote that I read one time where he talked about building self-efficacy and building integrity, really. And he said, what you do is you make promises to yourself. He said, don't overcommit, but never underdeliver. What do you think? What are your thoughts on that? The idea of making promises, they're almost like these commitments to ourselves, that this is my goal, this is what I will follow through and do. And now it's interesting, he has in there, don't overcommit, because he's obviously, that nuance of don't actually set yourself up for failure here, but don't underdeliver either.
Yeah. So this may be taking us again into the territory of personalised medicine, but personalised based not on biology, but on psychology, and in particular personality. I am a person who loves to underpromise and overdeliver. I love
to
the
yourself,
experience.
To yourself or to other people?
Everyone.
Right.
Everyone. Yeah. So now I realise that straight away there's a shadow side to that, and the shadow side is potentially that I'm actually doing a lot less perhaps than I'm capable of, and I'm not pushing myself to that point of failure. By the way, just as an aside here, the idea of kind of failure is actually important in some health metrics, for example, in strength training. So my colleague Jeff Young in New York would say that if you're not strength training to within 1 or 2 reps of physical failure, you're not actually training hard enough. So you actually need to have that experience of, I tried to get out 10, but I collapsed at 9. And again, normalising that experience helps us to approach that with a different mindset. That the failure is not an undesired outcome. That the failure actually tells us, wow, I'm actually learning how to push right up hard against the limits of my capacity.
Where those limits are. True.
Yeah.
In fact, I think the resistance training analogy is a very good one, because that is, we're very comfortable in that space with the idea of going to failure, and even beyond failure. They, in resistance exercises, sometimes they'll do these things called negative reps, where pretty much when you can't lift that weight anymore, you'll have someone help you lift it, and then you'll just lower the weight.
And you've got to let it down. You've got to do the eccentric component. Exactly right. So there's potentially some lessons there for us to learn, I think, about, in one sense, the desirability of failure and the way that we frame the meaning of failure. And that's the critical difference there.
Yes.
The failure in resistance training doesn't mean, Darren, you're weak and hopeless. What's wrong with you? What it actually means is, wow, Darren, you have worked right to the very, very edge of your, and here's the important word, current capacity. Your current capacity. This is not a statement for all time. When
No.
when you fail at 9 reps, bench pressing, 155 kilos, as I know you do, Darren.
Yeah, all the time.
That doesn't mean that 9 reps of 155 kilos is your forever limit. That just means that that's the limit of your capacity right now, until you grow stronger, until you develop more internal resources to do that.
I like that. What I like about that perspective is that doesn't define you as an individual forever. That
Exactly right.
I actually like that perspective.
Yeah,
Failure isn't permanent.
And we're now investing the person more with the desirable sort of elements of striving, pushing, building internal strength and capacity and so on. And this is what we actually want to be doing generally in behavioural change. Not aiming for weighing 80 kilos by the 31st of December or something like that, but really developing these internal resources and capacities. The other thing that the other perspective I think that can be valuable here is the whole language that we use. And I sometimes I do use the word goals, and sometimes I use the word experiments as well. And one of the nice things I like about using the word experiment is that if you think back to high school chemistry classes, say, where you did lots of experiments, test tubes, Bunsen burners, drops of coloured this and drops of coloured that, then you would heat it up. You could never fail an experiment. I mean, it's logically not possible to fail an experiment. The only thing that you can do is gather information about the actions that you've taken beforehand. And as a result of that information, you can then make choices about what you do after there.
I really like
maybe
that.
next time I add more of this liquid or more of that liquid, or I lower the temperature or whatever it might be. All of those variables that you manipulated, you now have the capacity to remanipulate on the basis of the feedback that you received, the information that you received. And that's a really useful mindset in behaviour change.
It is. Yeah, I really like that. And I sometimes think I conduct what I call self-experiments, and I'll try, how did that work? Did that make me feel better, worse? Did that seem to work for me or not? So yeah, I really like that. I think that creates a whole different paradigm in terms of your approach, which one that really feeds into that idea of, what you're becoming, and what you potentially could become. So I like that.
Yeah, exactly right. And you're creating that feedback loop. So when you ask yourself, what did that feel like to do that? You're closing that feedback loop for yourself.
Yes.
So that you can take that experience, process it, extract the meaning from it, and then apply that to your next action, whatever that may be. Yeah. So this sort of brings us also then to the whole area of the type of goal that we use. And you made the reference to SMART goals before. I think you and I have spoken about SMART goals in the past. For people who are very, very new to setting goals, I think there's some merit to SMART goals. There's a couple of things I don't like about SMART goals. The first is that there's no standardized agreement about what those letters actually mean. Some people say N means measurable, some people say it means manageable, some people say A is actionable or achievable, some people say R is realistic, others say it's relevant, and so on. So there's a disagreement about the meaning of those. The second one is that the framework doesn't really have a robust conceptual framework. The structure, SMART, doesn't really have a robust conceptual framework behind it. SMART goals first appeared in a business journal several decades ago, certainly not in the context of health behaviour change. Locke and Latham, we've talked about Locke and Latham before, they have goal-setting theory, which is a robust framework for understanding and building goals. And there are also goals called open goals, And open goals I'm becoming increasingly fascinated with. An open goal is essentially a let's see what you can do here kind of goal. Walk for 30 minutes and see how far you get, or walk at this pace and see how long you can go for, or start bench pressing with the bar and add incremental weights of 2.5 kilos, and see how long you can do that for. That they're all examples of open goals. So there's not that highly specific outcome at the end, and it does just the language of that, I think, does invoke much more of that sort of curious experimental thinking. Let's just see what happens. Let's just see what happens here. Interestingly, there's a version of open goals which I first came across 35 years ago when I was working as a family therapist, and we used to sometimes use what we call observational goals with clients, and observational goals are really great when you're a little bit ambivalent about change. So, and that ambivalence can be either because you don't feel fully committed to the change, you're not sure that it's what you want, or because you don't believe necessarily that you can do this because you're a little uncertain about your own capacity. And observational goals work really well when you think about the idea that we all have heuristics that we live by. So, for example, if I say to you, what time do you wake up in the morning? What are you going to tell me?
6:37.
6:37. Okay, so that's your mental map that says, I wake up at 6:30 or 7 every day. Now, if I actually got you to do a sleep diary and record exactly the time, there would be much more variation to that than your 6:30. Way more variation to that. If I said to you, how many pieces of fruit do you eat each day? You'd say, 2, 3. And if I really looked at it, or if we really looked at it together, there'd be much more variation. So our heuristics rarely reflect the reality of our lives. This is where observational goals become really useful for people who are uncertain about change. So a particular patient might say, I just never have the energy in the morning to go walking. So it's a really limiting belief for that person. So in that context, I might say to that person, I wonder whether you might be happy to do a bit of an experiment between now and next time we meet. And most people would say yes to that. Or actually, most people say, depends what it is. But most people will agree to do something like that. And then I would reassure the person that they don't have to do anything different. They just have to observe something in their own behaviour. And then people say, okay, I'll do that. And so the observation task might be every morning when you wake up for the next week, I want you to notice how much energy you have, and in particular, notice any day where you have even just a little bit more energy than you usually do. So that's now, it's a goal of a sort, because it's directing the person's attention towards, something and paying attention to something. It's also not something that you can really fail to do. I mean, I guess you could. You could not pay any attention at all, but it's a pretty easy thing to do, and there's no pressure to perform there. This is not asking the person to do anything different, to engage in different behaviour, but simply to observe what's likely to be a naturally occurring fluctuation that they haven't yet noticed, or that they've dismissed in their mind because their story to themselves is, I never have any energy for this. So those sorts of goals can be really useful, particularly for people early in the process of change, because they're low commitment, but they do support the person to start bringing their attention a little more mindfully to their own behaviour, and to observe some things that perhaps they haven't before. Then maybe over time we would build smart goals. Then as a person moves through feeling more efficacious, more confident, then we might make the goals, or might start looking to make goals a little more complex, perhaps even a little multi-layered for the person. And there's always that option for open goals as well. But all of that is done, at least for me, all of that is done with this mindset of curiosity and experimentation about what you're learning, and importantly, the resources and capacities that you're building for yourself, rather than just, this particular number or this particular achievement. Yeah.
You know what? As you're speaking about that, that word "curious" was coming to the fore for me, because I've realised in recent years, I'd say in the last decade or so, my position on goals has changed somewhat. So I do have some specific goals that I'm chasing and that I'd like. But what I have noticed, I came to an observation. This is more just an approach to life, if you like. And that is, I realised that all of the really good things and impactful things that had happened to me in my life were not things that I'd set my sight on and chased after in a dogged fashion. Yeah. And that actually, that was quite a shift for me, because I realised that, hey, you know what, maybe I don't want to be so intent and focused on a particular goal, because in doing so, I limit other opportunities that might be present. And so my approach now to life is to more walk through it with eyes wide open, and to be curious, and then obviously to be courageous enough to step forward when, perhaps a particular door or a particular opportunity opens up. But that's been quite liberating for me in many ways. So I'm still quite a driven person. I think I still like having those. Yeah, I'm going to chase that. I've got particular sporting skill I'd like to learn and master. But in terms of my big approach to life, I don't have, when I was younger, these goals, these lofty goals that I'm dogged. Because we hear about this, set your goals and go after them and don't let anything get in your way. And I don't know that I subscribe to that. I actually think that maybe what a better approach is to say, this is the true north. This is the, the direction I'd like to go. But hey, what might come along on this amazing journey as we venture forward? That's certainly been my approach. And
I think not everybody, I think, is necessarily driven in that way that you describe. Some of us have personalities that mean we are a bit, we are a bit dogged with things, and we persevere, or as psychologists say, sometimes we perseverate as well. Perseverate means continue to go after something even when all the evidence is showing you that you're not going to get it. In other words, the metaphorical beating your head against a wall. So sometimes doggedness slips into perseveration, which is not a great outcome. But whether you're driven or not, we all have motivations, perhaps with one exception, and that is, when people are experiencing very, very severe depression, for example, then I think the experience of a motivation or a complete absence of motivation can accompany that. But if that's not the case, then we all have motivations, and motivations are simply represented by the important underlying needs that we identify to ourselves. Even the person who, drags themselves through the front door after work each day, makes it as far as their living room, where they kick off their shoes and then collapse on the lounge and start eating, a bag of potato chips and, drinking soft drink, there's still an underlying need for something that we need to understand there. And once we understand that need, then we understand a little more about the motivation. Once we understand that, then we're starting to open up other possibilities for being able to get there. And then, of course, we can start having those conversations about building the resources that might enable you to pursue those other options and look at this from those other perspectives. But if we get locked into simply a goal represented by a number or a particular outcome, and don't attend to those underlying needs and motivations, then we almost always, I think, have the potential at least to get stuck. So goals are wonderful. Goals are wonderful, and we've got to approach them in the right way.
My question to you after this discussion was, I was going to say, so summing it up, what would you say? Are goals good or are they bad? And so your approach is goals are good, but we need to approach them in the right way.
Exactly right. Yeah. Goals are good, and they've got to be constructed in a way that's meaningful to the person who's going to achieve that. Endeavouring to run a park run in under 17 minutes had significance for you. It was connected to age. It was connected to perceptions of strength and capacity. Importantly, it was connected to something that you already loved doing and were committed to doing anyway. So in that context, that particular goal had an extraordinary level of personal meaning for you, and it's important when we work with patients and clients that the goals that we support them to design for themselves have that same sense of meaning to them. Otherwise, it's all a bit, it just becomes unanchored and pointless. So that's one part of it, meaning in the goal. And the second part, of course, is just sort of orienting ourselves correctly so that the objective here is not simply the dogged pursuit of the outcome, but more importantly, the development and the cultivation of the feedback mechanisms, the capacity to have that experience of pushing up against your limits, and the satisfaction of knowing that you've worked so hard, you've actually found the edge of your ability here. The knowledge that you're continuing to build and develop internal resources which can be applied not only to this situation, but most likely to a number of other situations in your life and so on. And above all, that mindset that we talked about of curiosity and experimentation. And if we can do it in that way, then I think goals really do become very, very useful for all of us. They become useful for us as practitioners, so that we can observe the steps that patients and clients are making, and most importantly, those goals become curious for the people themselves.
Yeah. So goals are wonderful, in your words, as long as we approach them in the right way. I think it's a great takeaway. Good discussion.
Yeah.
Lift is presented by Simon Matthews and Darren Morton. It's sponsored by the Lift Project and supported by Avondale University. Music provided by Pixabay. If you have a question or a topic you would like to hear more about, send us an email to podcast@theliftproject.global. The Lift Project. Lift your mood, lift your life.